are back with the Dollywood recreation. Welcome everyone to this second episode of a really long project that I anticipated. I really am starting to see the true scale of this project as I mean just doing the front entrance area here. So that's what this episode is about. It's about the not necessarily the main entrance. It's about kind of the walk-in area where the park lines would normally form before the park opened. This is where the ticketing is, where you can buy your tickets if you haven't done it online. Where the turnstiles are. There's a nice little bridge in this area. The trams also drop off in this general area. Not really, but I mean, it holds a lot of guest traffic flow, and it's a big part of Dollywood. So that's what I'm focusing on in this episode. And like you saw in the title, this is the Turnstiles cover here. We don't actually have the Turnstiles in Planet Coaster 2 yet. That was something we did have in Planet Coaster 1 with the Maker's Toolkit. But I think I'm going to make one in-game, just using the in-game pieces here. I don't do it in this video, but I think in the future y'all might see it just kind of hanging out there in the time lapse. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I definitely will probably do that manually, unless we get it, the turnstiles in a future update. I don't know. We'll see about that. Maybe I should hold off until like the next update or something. But anyways, yeah, this cover is very much of the same architecture as this entrance area of the park. Very much of a Victorian-esque architecture. There is actually a lot of columns and white paint in this type of architecture. Maybe even some stucco too. So it's very much Victorian and 1800s-esque, I guess. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the style of architecture it is. I do want to point out the length of the video here. It is actually a lot longer than I wanted it to be. Originally, when I was filming all this footage, I wanted it to be somewhat of a shorter video. I want to try to keep this series and its videos under 15 minutes each. Just because I know, there's going to be a lot of episodes in this series. I mean, I'm estimating maybe 100 or something, just because I don't want to include a lot of work in every single episode. I want there to be a decent amount of work, but not a lot of work to where it's just overwhelming how much I do. I'd rather have a little bit more of a quality over the quantity or the time. So I will be, limiting and cutting things out of what I record normally, and I also will just try to limit what I am doing in every episode. Now, with all that said, this is definitely a more lengthy video. It comes in around the 20-minute mark, which is pretty lengthy. That was because of a lot of footage and just a lot of things to do to where I couldn't cut everything. So it just made the video super lengthy. I will definitely fix that in the future. One thing I am going to start implementing for these videos are the kind of parts that I'm going to be splitting them into. I'm going to try to keep the topics based around, the topics that I'm talking about, based around those part titles, or the chapter titles, I guess you could call them. So everything is going to be relevant to that. So that is one goal that I'm going to try to do. I think it will just, if people are confused on what I'm doing, I don't have to necessarily point it out each time. I can just use a chapter title to say that. But about this chapter title, this is the Pathways section, and I definitely wanted to try out the new Planet Coaster 2 Pathways, since I really haven't messed with them all that much. They were a blast to work with, and I think my favorite setting is the stamp tool, which just allows you to literally place a piece anywhere, and then it builds off a grid of that certain stamp, and then you can just exit out of that and then start a new stamp. It's just incredible, the ease that you can just build paths now. So here I'm messing with the terrain a little bit, and that's because there is a creek that runs through under this little bridge thing. before you get to the turnstiles. This creek is called Middle Creek. It runs through the entirety of the bottom half of Dollywood, and it just adds kind of this visual appeal to the park. And this creek actually is not just in Dollywood alone. It actually goes on for miles and miles outside of the park, which is really just fun to follow on Google Maps if you ever have any spare time. Just go follow Middle Creek. But anyways, this creek runs through the bottom half-ish of the park, and this is the creek that comes up here underneath this bridge. And this bridge was fun to build because it's not something like super intricate. It's very simple. It just has these it has these brick pillars with this kind of marble slab on top, and then this black metal fencing across the bridge. I think it looks pretty good. It's mainly just to serve a purpose of, people shouldn't be jumping into the creek below them, so they need some sort of fence here. So yeah, it just serves a simple purpose. There's some trees and stuff in this creek and everything just to add more visual appeal, but other than that, the bridge is fairly simple. It has again, the nice Victorian feel with it, especially with the brick pattern that it uses. Brick is a little more of a industrial type architecture, but it does kind of hold the same Victorian-esque architecture because of the marble, I guess, on top of the bricks. But I'm not a super intelligent person when it comes to types of architecture, so take that with a grain of salt. So after this bridge, or in the order that I'm building it, I guess, after it, there is a pathway that sort of branches out into a wider shape. It almost forms like this V-shape-ish type scale, and then this pathway leads into the next part of this video. So now we get to the meaty part of the video, or I guess the lengthy part of this video, and that's the ticketing building, which is, just this little covering / ticket office that is in this little front entrance area where people can buy tickets if they haven't gotten their tickets online. So yeah, that's what this building is for. It's not necessarily intricate, and it is, I would say, a slightly different style of architecture. You'll begin to see it in a minute, but it holds more of a, I would say, a stucco type architecture, and it has this stucco orange paneling across the roof line. It does have the same white columns and everything that holds up the building, but it does look a little bit different from the Victorian not opera house, the Victorian theater that we built in the last episode, and then the turnstiles that we just built. So it is slightly different, but it still holds that same feeling of the Victorian-esque. Here's this, I guess, stucco that I was talking about, but it is basically the same, just with a little bit, I guess, less detail is what I want to say. So if you've ever been to Dollywood, you may know that this is the first building that you see basically in the park, and it's somewhat iconic because it has these letterings or signs with arrows pointing to its respected area. So it has the word tickets and then the word turnstiles with these large arrows pointing to where to go for it. And it's somewhat iconic for Dollywood because it's, like I said, it's one of the first buildings you see when you come to the park that's technically inside the park, I want to say. So yeah, it's somewhat iconic, and it just, I love how words add so much to buildings. If you've ever wanted to add more details to your buildings, just add words, add signs. For some reason, it makes the building pop because it makes it a little bit more interactive, I would say. So yeah, if you've ever struggled with just realistic buildings, add signs. And what's cool about Dollywood most of the time, and Herschel parks in general, is that most of the time they use signs to get humor across. I'm thinking of Silver Dollar City, where they have just little signs like, don't look in this hole, and then you look in the hole on this building and it's just like a mirror and you can look straight into your eye. just stuff like that, where it's just, it adds to the park. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why these parks are the best theme parks in the world, because they just have little details like that that's just on the side of a building that nobody, like Six Flags or Cedar Fair, or Cedar Fair is not a thing anymore, oops, no, they wouldn't be able to, or wouldn't think about including in their parks, just because, you know, it's not family run. It's just, it's this huge industry who doesn't think about things like that. So small details with texts and everything like that adds to the park to where it makes the park better, in my opinion. So I mentioned this earlier, but I do make some cuts in this video, and those cuts are related to, again, the time of this video. I make one here with the white siding or paneling. As you can see now, it just kind of pops in the view here, and I cut this out again because it helps the length of the video, and it's also rather boring to watch. I am doing a little bit of it on screen here just so you can see the process that I used to do this, but it's very simple. You just, wherever there's a wall texture change, there's a piece of siding that separates it, and because of this architecture style, it's that white siding that I've messed with a lot in this video. And then obviously I'm lining that compared to photos and everything that I found online. So that is the cut that I made. I thought it was rather boring to watch, so I left most of it out. Okay, so we are now in the last portion of this video, which is related to the scenery and making everything look nice and tidy. And one of the ways I did that was using this brick planter siding, or brick planter separator, which pulls off of that, again, that Victorian-esque industrial type architecture, which Dollywood really likes to use in this front main entrance area, and actually throughout the front bottom, or I guess the bottom half of the park, just because it's very much of a Victorian area. So they use brick a lot and white a lot, so it's just worth mentioning that I'm going to be talking about that a lot. But these brick separators separate the planters from the pathway, which is very obvious. And they have mulch in them. They have some trees, not a lot of trees. I think definitely a minimal amount of trees. But you can tell it's well kept. They weren't originally there, of course. They were planted by Dollywood themselves. So it's just very much of a, I almost want to say fake-ish flower bed, if that makes sense. So yeah, and then coming up is this pathway here, or more of a road using the asphalt-ish type pathway, and this is a road that leads into a backstage area. Actually, it's not where trams drop off, which I think is a major misconception about the park. The trams drop off in a different area, just upwards, but this road actually is just used for really just traffic flow of guests, not even cars. And then it actually leads to Lightning Rod and the 50s or 40s area, I guess, of the park for backstage and everything for employees. And then again, here's more of the pathway fixing and everything for more flower beds and planters. And this is where Dollywood really shines in their park. They're very good at, I would say, scenery, but more specifically flower beds. I mean, they have a whole festival dedicated to flowers, so it just makes sense that they're good at what they do when it comes to like flower beds and everything. And also what separates them from parks like Six Flags and everything, because they're actually good at scenery. They're actually good at flowers. And they can make parks look pretty with just a simple flower bed. So this is really what separates them from Six Flags and all that. Here is more details to Middle Creek, which I mentioned earlier. Just making the terrain look a little bit more realistic so that it doesn't have this just drop into the abyss, I guess. Most creeks don't have just like this crazy canyon drop into them. It has a very subtle flow. And then this mulch, I guess, flower bed has a retaining wall that separates it from the creek. I think this is one of the areas that I wasn't really sure about because there's not really many pictures of it, and even videos I tried to look. So I think there's a flower bed here. Once I get to Dollywood again, I will definitely have a lot more photos and things to take of, because I really just want to make sure I have the proper photos and everything of the park. Okay, and then here's something that was really, really fun to make, probably the most fun part of the build in this episode. I didn't know if I should include it or not because it's very simple, but it's basically an advert for the park. It's a sign with an advert on it, and it's not a TV screen. I did use one here, but Dollywood uses just a panel or like a painting or something. But of course we don't have that in Planet Coaster 2, so I just opted for the television screen. But what makes this really cute is this little, it's almost like a miniature building, because it has this tiny little Victorian architecture style to it, just a little bit, which makes it really cute and quaint, I would say. It actually was really difficult because it was hard to fill in this little gap here with the stucco, which made it, I just used the art pieces for the stucco shape, but I guess it turned out okay. And then I used I already did it, but the wood paneling for the roof design here. It has shingles in real life for something this tiny. I didn't want to do shingles, so I just included this like wood paneling and everything. But it's just this really cute detail that has it's not a directional sign, it's literally just an advert for like really the season of the park. It's in, like I talked about earlier, if they're in the flower festival, then they'll probably advert like, oh, happening today is the flower spectacular, or something like that kind of just adds to the park. Again, making Dollywood and Herschend the, I guess, the master of advertising in the theme park industry. So I thought it was just a little cute build, and it does, again, take up more of the time in this video, but I couldn't not include it because it was just so cute and fun to build. So yeah, there you go. That's one of the most fun parts of the video I had recording, and it just kind of slides into the flower bed there, and it has the same Victorian isk type architecture using this paneling across the top and everything. So yeah, and then finally today I wanted to include the last little bits of flower beds and everything, which I do want to talk about the flower types here. I didn't get everything specifically exact to what they have. They do definitely have a lot of flowers, but they also just have a lot of just nonchalant bushes, which we don't have in game, so I tried to mimic them a little bit with what we have in game. I think it worked out pretty well, but again, know that this is a recreation, and recreations are never, exact. So I tried to get as close to it as I could, using, I don't even know what some of these bushes are called. I would say, I know what they were called in Planet Coaster 1, which was the forest bush, which I included here. So yeah, that was the type of bush that I majorly included. And also Dollywood, what separates it from, I guess, my favorite park, which is SDC, what separates from that is they actually have these well-kept bushes to where, you can tell they like pruned it and, cut it. And they actually take care of their bushes rather than letting it, go wild and stuff. So they cut it into these specific shapes using, like just the flower bed tools and everything. So yeah, that's why you can tell like it's Dollywood. Like some parts of Dollywood in Silver City are really just, they're like indistinguishable. Like I don't even know the names of the parts of Dollywood, which is something I'm gonna figure out through the series. But there is the western area, which is kind of by Tennessee Tornado. Some of the photos you look at, you can't tell if it's Silver City or Dollywood. You're just like, okay, what park is this? And you just have to look it up. But this main entrance area, because of the style that they opted for, because of the Victorian style, and because of the way they do their flower beds and the way they do their planters and plants, the way they cut them, you can obviously tell this is very much of an upkept part of the park, and very different from really any other park out there. I guess one park it would really relate to that I've been to is more of a Busch Gardens Williamsburg park. The last time I went was really a long time ago. Like they didn't have any of the major roller coasters there that they have today at Busch Gardens, but they do incorporate a lot of like flower beds and everything from what I can remember. Because they have that theme of different countries and everything. So I guess that's what I would relate to it the most. I haven't been to a lot of theme parks, so I couldn't, I couldn't tell you about Kings Island, King's Dominion, or things like that. But I can relate to Busch Gardens here, and it definitely looks really good when Dollywood does their planter and flower bed designs. So yeah, and then this last little bit of the video is just more focusing on that, and also just more focusing on getting the outline for the main pathway when you're actually in the park. There's this little seating area here with these benches, and this marks really just you're actually in the park here. Everything in this video has been really just the entrance area, and technically you're not in the park yet, but this is actually in the park. Like, you've paid for your ticket and you're actually in the park now. And so that's really what rounds up the end of this video. And so I really hope y'all enjoyed. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video. I'm gonna try to upload sort of a bi-weekly-ish weekly schedule, not including a lot in every episode. So yeah, that is the episode done, and I hope y'all enjoyed. Have a fantastic day, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.